Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this latest Advice Line live event. I am delighted to welcome you all along this afternoon and to have colleagues with me today. I've got Caroline Schofield and Samantha Ritchie, two of our community advisors who are here to answer any questions or provide any advice and support that you might need. If you want to ask a question of the two guys that are here with me today, then please do pop that into the channel and we can pick it up through that. So welcome both of you. Thank you for joining me again on this event. So we've had a few questions that have come in already underneath the post on Facebook. So if you guys are ready, we'll dive straight in.
Okay.
Yeah, great. So the first question here comes from an autistic person, and it's around employment. Now, we know there's a lot of research, a lot of bits and pieces in the media and the news around the disability employment gap and people being able to find appropriate employment, and really kind of drawn to this question because it's a really important topic for us to focus on. So the question is, I'm really struggling to find employment. I have a master's degree, but still finding it really hard. And after a few months of trying, I feel really quite exhausted and hopeless. Do you have any advice on how to find jobs as a neurodiverse person? And also, do you know of any diversity aware or responsive employers that this individual can maybe approach? So Caroline, I'll come to you first, because you've got a wealth of experience through our advice line, being one of our sort of longest serving community advisors on the team. This is a topic that currently comes up again and again, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really common issue, and I think it does reflect on maybe the lack of support when people are finishing university and on to that major next step, which is not an easy transition, but it's such a critical transition because you want people to feel supported and that they've got routes forward and to feel that they can be successful and use the knowledge that they've just and the work they've put in to being at university. So I think there's a few possibilities for going forward regarding inquiries such as this. Obviously, if it came into the advice, then we'd probably maybe need to individualise it slightly, so we'd maybe speak to the person or write to the person, so to individualise that a bit more. However, if we're just speaking a wee bit more generally, you've got organisations like Fair Start Scotland, Skills Development Scotland, Enable Scotland, so a few organisations that you can start with, but there's also maybe quite a few mentorships potentially out there. You've got organisations like for SWAN that are for women, so once again there may be projects like that, and also there sometimes local authorities have specific maybe projects that are going on as well. So you can see actually you need to kind of sometimes support people about what's going on locally, what's nationally, and actually what's individual for them. So there's a kind of three-prong attack really regarding that type of support. But also sometimes projects emerge that, if somebody calls them, we need to go and double check because there's always new things emerging that's potentially going on. And Samantha may have other ideas as well. Samantha, maybe you've got other things as well.
I would say as well, as there are one-stop shops in different areas, so it'd be good to contact your local one-stop shop. There's also finding employment modules as well through the National Autistic Society that kind of look at CVs, interviews, reasonable adjustments, things like that. And there's also ACAS as well in terms of neurodiversity that can be quite helpful for employees and employers as well. So there's quite a few different things to look at in terms of options.
I think there's a real sense of a kind of call to action here, isn't there? You've got just taking this question in isolation here, somebody who is highly qualified, a master's degree, that's something that takes a huge amount of effort and commitment to complete. So I think it's about having those conversations with employers. If you're out there and you're seeing job opportunities that align with your skills, about taking advantage of that opportunity to get in touch with the employer directly and say, look, these are the skills, these are the things that I have, how can you support me to flourish in your organization? Because ultimately a recruiter is looking for the best set of skills that they can possibly get. So it's about, you know, finding, opening up that dialogue, I think, isn't it, around this is what I need, this is what, you know, would help me, you know, can you facilitate that? And, you know, in terms of sort of diversity aware, responsive employers, you know, that again is a question to, you know, to kind of ask, I think is a legitimate question to ask of employers. You know, how are you going to support me as a neurodivergent individual? How can you provide me? But I suppose as well, it's about, you know, us being able to connect with employers, you know, and be able to open up those conversations. You know, I think a lot of employers maybe feel a bit worried or a bit cautious about, you know, getting it wrong, you know, and not being able to support effectively. So I think it sounds like there's a conversation to be had, isn't there, around how we can do this better.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Joanna, and I think as well, even reflecting back on the inquiries we get into the advice line, we do get quite a lot of employers coming in saying, how can we, if we don't do it, if we're not doing it right, how can we do it better? Or are we getting it right? Can Scottish Autism, can you help us, guide us to what we could be doing, or what does the community require? You know, and actually asking the community themselves. So I think we're at the precipice of something really quite exciting, and hopefully much better than maybe what it has been. So I think that would be great.
Yeah, because there's no underestimating the wealth of talent and skill that's out there. And we know that there are certain sectors across Scotland that are really struggling to recruit right now. Social care is one of them. You know, lots of different places. And it's right, you say, it's how do we connect people in the middle, so to speak, to have those conversations, to have that dialogue. And like you say, Caroline, you know, we are here, you know, we are able to start and have those conversations with people in terms of, you know, what might work, whether that's be, you know, if you're an employer watching this and you're thinking, actually, I feel like we should be doing more, you know, please do reach out to us. You know, you can do that through our advice line, or you can contact through our consultancy services directly. And, you know, we'll absolutely have that conversation, because the real, you know, there's a lot of research out there to support the value that autistic people bring to the workplace. A lot of research out there into how we can better support autistic people to flourish. But, you know, it's about putting that into practice now, isn't it? So that, you know, this question is no longer a question to be asked. It's that, you know, there's a smooth transition, as you said earlier, Caroline, of people being able to make that move from education into employment in whatever form they want that to look like.
I think as well, from there's some areas, some local areas, they do have quite significant long-term support that's been going on regarding employment. For example, Edinburgh's I think a really good example of that, where there's longevity of experience in relation to employment support, like Into Work and number 6 as well. So, and I think that there's lots of stuff there, and I think if we can just make it just connect even better, I think it would be wonderful for many people.
Yeah, and just a shout out here, we've got Elsa, who's joined us, and she said we've just started neurodiversity training at her workplace. And it's very interesting. So absolutely brilliant, Elsa, that, you know, there are examples of employers, you know, really kind of taking responsibility, I suppose, to connect people with knowledge and understanding around neurodiversity and neurodevelopmental differences in particular. So that's really comforting to know, Elsa. So thank you for sharing that with us. So if anybody would like any more information around employment, whether you're an employer or you're an autistic person, then please do reach out either through our advice line. And I know as well that my colleague in the background there has posted up information with regards to our consultancy services. So, you know, please do get in touch if you want to continue the conversation. So I do think it is, you know, a really important conversation to be having. So thank you both for that. So we'll move on to the next question here, and this is around housing. And again, a recurrent inquiry type, isn't it, Samantha, that comes up through the advice line, you know, around appropriate housing and again, around transitions, you know, wanting to sort of move out and have that independence in your own home. So this has come from a parent who says she would like some advice around housing for her 32-year-old son who currently lives with her husband. He and the family are really keen that he's able to live as independently as possible. And again, there's quite a common inquiry, isn't it, Samantha?
Yeah, we do get a lot of inquiries in terms of housing, and I think in terms of either individuals or families kind of knowing what their next steps actually are and where to kind of start, where to kind of go. So what we'd recommend is that in terms of contacts and social work, in terms of getting an assessment of needs, just in terms of making sure that that young person is supported, so then they can get that assessment done, and then from that potentially there may be funding that's offered, and then moving that process forward from there. It may also be helpful for the parents to contact their local carer centre as well. That can also be a really helpful option as well. And another thing which could be good for their young person is actually having advocacy in place, because advocacy can be quite helpful, just to sort of help at, you know, any meetings or any sort of contact. And depending on where they are as well, as they may have a local one-stop shop.
And they're always really good places to kind of get that sort of specific local information, isn't it? And also to connect with other families and other people. I know our own one-stop shop over in Fife, you know, we've got a really active peer support network, haven't we? And really active parent and carer network. And I know lots of the other one-stop shops across Scotland do similar things, don't they, Samantha?
Yeah, because there's different one-stop shops throughout Scotland that offer different groups for parents, also different social groups for autistic adults as well. And it's just looking, depending on what area you are, what one-stop shop is local to you, for you to be able to access that, to connect with others as well, which can be great whether you're a parent or whether you're an adult.
Caroline, is again, you know, you and I have worked together for a long time now. You know, these are not new themes that we're coming across, are they? They're recurrent. Is there anything sort of from your you know, experience that might be helpful here?
Yeah, I think when we're looking at a family who's looking at quite a major transition for their, could be an adult child, but an adult, let's say. So I think with discussions with the families, it'd be really helpful to try and get a bit of an idea about the adult they're talking about. They could be very able adult, they may need maybe more support. So I think sometimes it's quite good to kind of have a wee discussion regarding that, because sometimes you might kind of support families in slightly different ways depending on what their individual families' needs are. And also families can be very, very worried about the future, about parents feeling a bit they're getting older and they're worrying about what's going to happen to my child, even though it's an adult. So I think there's lots of for families, it can be quite an emotional question when they come to us, and it can be quite distressed, because they don't know what to do, they don't know where to go, where to start. And sometimes I think what we can sometimes do is just be that initial bit of it and supporting them for them to make contact with the right organisations, and just to guide them to say, well, we think maybe this might be helpful, but also to help them consider, you know, their needs of the child they're talking, the adult they're talking about, because they may need more support than they're thinking, or they may not need support. And you know, and just even a bit about worrying about contacting social work, that can be a real panic for families. So I think that initial contact with a family, just to reassure and give that kind of that initial guidance, can be helpful. But families are often quite frightened by the thought of this and quite fearful, you know, when they first contact us regarding that.
And I think it is, isn't it? It's something that really resonated with me, what you were saying there around this sort of creating that space to sort of have, you know, that those feelings and those concerns are absolutely legitimate and absolutely are important, you know, to create the space to be able to have that discussion. you know, sometimes it's helpful, as you say, to connect with a professional, or connect with somebody who can provide you with that sort of more impartial advice. But also in the same breath, it's also sometimes helpful to connect with other families that may be going through a similar stage of life, if you like, and you know, and know that you're, you know, whilst what you're going through is very personal and individual to you, but there are other people going out through that as well, and you're not alone. You're not alone in that process.
And I think for parents to speak to parents who have adult children, I think that can be really enlightening. And I think there is a kind of subtle difference here, and I think there's probably a wee bit more need for that more generally, for adults being able to have a kind of community with other adults, because I think we can learn from each other, and I think that can be I think that's really, really helpful. There's not very many of them in Scotland, but I think it's for those that can access that, I think it's very, very helpful, because people have been through it before through the system, maybe been through the bit about contacting social work or looking at guardianship and all areas like that. So I think that can be very, very helpful to other families. I think you're right.
Yeah, just having that it's that connection, isn't it? Those relationships. But hopefully some kind of practical advice there in terms of next steps that Samantha's been able to share in terms of getting in contact, you know, and exploring those care needs assessments and starting that dialogue and that conversation. My colleague has posted up information around local carer centres as well, and they're really good sources of support and advice, and again tend to have a little bit more local kind of knowledge and information as there as well. But you know, please do get back in touch if if we can sort of unpick some of the individuality of that question a little bit more. These guys are there. The advice line is open Tuesday to Friday, 10 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You can pick up the phone, you can send an email, or you can get us on live chat via our website, and these guys will be able to unpick that a little bit more with you. So hopefully some helpful pointers in there for you. If you're watching along with us, please do pop a question in the comments. We love to get those kind of live questions going. It's lovely to be able to answer a question to somebody we know who's watching and who's there. So please do pop that in the comments and we'll pick that up. But we do have another question here that's been sent in previously ahead of the event. So I'll move to that one. And this is around sensory understanding, and again something that a lot of families contact us about, and this is a family who observe that their young person is really struggling with sort of being sensorily overwhelmed, and those sensory sensitivities, struggling with noise and touch and texture, and they're wondering around what can they do to help. Forgive me reading between this. I think there's probably quite a lot of stress, bit of distress happening here for this family. So Caroline, I'll come to you first in terms of, and I know you have experience of supporting young people through play to explore sensories and sensory understanding and things like that. So I'll come to you first with that one.
Okay, with an inquiry like that, when it comes in, I think the initial thing is really to listen to what the family are telling us about their child, and to really listen to the detail regarding not just about the sensory stuff, but also the things that are kind of surrounding that as well, about communication, and any kind of rigid thinking. So we need to look at kind of the bigger picture. But I think when we're looking at sensory stuff, initially families are often looking for a sensory assessment or things like that, to make sense of their child's presentation, because you can make a lot of assumptions, and often families are looking for the professional that can kind of give a bit of support. So one of the things we may do, and it can be helpful, is if the local NHS possibly has an occupational therapy service for children, and most of them do. Really interestingly, lots of them do have a self-referral system. Not all, but many do have a self-referral. So parents can just simply phone and they can self-refer. Often, luckily, many OT departments now, they also have a helpline. They have it usually within maybe like half a day or a few hours a week. and it's usually posted on their website. So they've actually got a helpline where you can go and discuss your child and their sensory difficulties, along other things. So that's, I think sometimes that can be helpful, because parents might feel they have to wait for years, but actually they maybe don't have to do that. And having maybe that professional providing that more kind of detailed sensory assessment can be helpful. I have to say, I did find recently that sometimes it's not always on the website. So I had just lifted the phone to an OT department, and just by chance they were just saying, oh, we've got a new helpline, it's not on the website yet, but it's just opened. So it's actually worth actually giving the local OT department a wee call anyway to see do they have a helpline and can you self-refer. But if an inquiry like that does come in, and if you're speaking to a family, I think it's really important to look at lots of things, including the barriers that the sensory difficulties can make happen, so that maybe the parent can't engage or whatever, or maybe the child won't play. And I think maybe looking at the areas like play and how to use sensory toys and how that will look for that individual family, it can be helpful, and it can be quite structured. So there's lots of things that we can look at with sensory. I don't know if Samantha has anything else to add regarding that particular bit.
NHS Tayside actually have some really good videos on sensory processing for parents, which can be quite helpful, that can be accessed via YouTube. And there are some different documents on making sense of sensory behaviour and making sense of your own sensory behaviour, that we can put links up for as well, that can be quite helpful documents, and you can look through them in terms of information that's specific to your own child. So there's different information, but I think as a parent it's sometimes hard to know where to start and where to find that. So it's good to be able to get in contact with ourselves through the advice line and chat things through, and have events like this where we can share that information.
I think for me, one of the bits there is that the amount of sort of stress that's around that. So looking at how you can, and some of the advice that we give to families is around how do you reduce some of that stress, some of that sensory overload that's maybe happening there. And I know through my own work with families, and I remember a parent coming up going, we always struggle around sort of personal care, cleaning the teeth, brushing the hair. And then one day I thought to myself, well, does it really matter? And actually when we sort of reduced some of that pressure to, clean teeth in a certain way or brush their hair in a certain way, actually we found that my child was able to cope with some, with other things that were maybe then going to be more sensory stimulating for them. So I suppose it's, it's reflecting on, what kind of sensory input is your child getting and how are they processing that sensory information. And, there are lots of really great, as Caroline said, kind of sensory toys that you can use to kind of, get that sensory feedback, but in a different way, and looking at how you can kind of get that feeling of, that kind of feeling of balance. And, but you're right, Caroline, having that, it sounds to me like there's a lot going on here for this particular child. There's noise, there's touch, there's texture. So actually looking at the sensory system and that sensory regulation as a whole really would be really beneficial for this family.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it can be other factors that then impact on everything being a bit heightened. So it could be, there's just so much going on. There's just too much of something, and it could be a school issue. It could be something that's coming from somewhere else. But what we're seeing is a distressed child, and everything's just affected. So I think we sometimes have to look at the bigger picture to then look at the kind of minutiae of something. But so I think it is quite a complex picture, and each family is absolutely unique as well. So there's not just one answer, and that's anyway for us that's the joy of it, because every family is a bit different. So every inquiry is absolutely unique. Within that, you've always got like a child or an adult who's struggling for whatever reason.
I think that's one of the real assets of having the advice line, is that we can take the time to speak and directly and have that conversation backwards and forwards. And I'm also thinking, in terms of this particular inquiry, we've got programs like Get Set for Autism, haven't we, whereby families can come and they can get advice and support over a number of weeks from one of these guys around specific issues that are potentially challenging you as a family, or that you feel that you would just like to know a little bit more about, or that you know, you're worried about, or whatever it might be. You're, you know, as the parent, as the carer, you're in charge about setting those outcomes for yourself in terms of what you want to get out of the sessions. And they're available to families right across Scotland, aren't they? You know, they can just contact you guys and get referred into that programme. There's no cost or anything like that, is there?
Yeah, there's no cost involved. It's just a case of, you know, having that initial conversation, getting a little bit more information in terms of the support they're looking for, and then gathering those details and then taking it from there. So yeah, it just means you can have that sort of more tailored support specific to your family, because in terms of sensory challenges, that can be very different for different people, because some people, like we've said, it could be in terms of noise, others it could be in terms of like bathing, showering, teeth brushing, and you know, it's everyone's very individual. So that's the great thing about Get Set, it can be tailored to that individual young person and family. Yeah,
great. And just to, I've just noticed we've got a comment from Maggie here saying, is there a phone advice line? Absolutely, 100%. And my colleague will post the details of the phone line. So yeah, the phone line is open Tuesday to Friday, 10 o'clock in the morning till 4 p.m. in the afternoon. You will connect directly with one of our community advisors. It doesn't go through a switchboard or anything like that. So you know, you'll come straight to one of these guys or one of the other others within the team. On a rare occasion that they might be otherwise engaged on another call, there is an option to leave a voicemail. And one of the advisors will phone you back as soon as they possibly can. And you know, again, they can talk across a range of issues and a range of topics, from employment, education, housing, mental health, right across all those things that you may want to chat about. So you know, do get in touch with the guys to say. It's open 10 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Tuesday to Friday. So coming to our kind of final question before we wrap up for today. And Samantha, I'm going to come to you on this one. You know, you come from an education background, which you've shared with us on previous sessions of this. So we have a family here who are worried about that transition from school. So their son is leaving school in 2024 and unsure what they would need to support him going forward, and not really sure what's out there in terms of further support post school.
One thing I would definitely look at is in terms of transitions. So there are things like the Scottish Transitions Forum that have a lot of advice in terms of those sort of next steps when you're moving from, you know, one area to another. There's also a really good website called Talking About Tomorrow, so that's got some really lovely resources as well. And there is an organisation called Salvesen Mind Room who provide advocacy for young people up to the age of 25. So they have actually a transitions document that look at all those individual transitions, and we can put up the links for those which can be helpful for you to access, because I know there's a lot of sometimes uncertainty, a lot of questions around these sort of things. And I think depending on what area you are transitioning in, whether it's, you know, some people might be moving on to employment, others might be moving on to college, university. It's good to kind of know what those sort of next steps could look like. So I'd probably say those 3 resources would be a really good starting point.
And I suppose more importantly, around starting that conversation now with the school. You know, schools are back, you know, now's the time to have that conversation, to ask to have that conversation with your child's school around, you know, what does this transition look like? Because for some children, that transition will start now and will be a gradual, slow, iterative process. For others, you know, that transition can start later on, but it's about getting it right for that child at this time. So really, you know, connecting with the school at this stage and saying, look, can we come around the table? Let's have the conversation about what this transition from school looks like for my young person. Caroline, is there anything you wanted to kind of add to that?
Well, I think Samantha's kind of put most of it there, and I think as well that I think the thing is to be informed about what should be happening. So like organisations like Inquire, they have a helpline, they have a great website, lots of information. So I think often on the advice line, when we're speaking to families, you want to make sure the family feels that they have the information they require so that they know what they should be asking and what they should be doing. And I think it's really important to always imagine that you're wanting to feel like families feel that they've got the reins of a situation, so that they're kind of going to school and they're prepared to ask the right things. And some transitions can take about 2 years, some a bit less. So I think it's really important that that transition process is definitely happening, because you don't want to be a few months before the child's leaving school and there's nothing organised. So that's you don't want that to be happening, and it shouldn't happen. But so I think making sure the families feel that they personally know what they should be doing for their child as well. And also we need to consider, what does the child want? So we're always looking for, when we're speaking to families, saying, well, what does your child actually want? Do they need a bit of advocacy so that their voice is heard? Are they being heard? Has somebody asked them? Are they giving the answer someone wants them to say, or what is it they would really like to do? And so I think there's like a subtle thing there as well regarding the actual young person themselves and their place within this transition as well. And I think the next step is such a big next step, and I think it's a hard one, but I think with the right support, it should be seamless.
Yeah, but now is the hour to start the conversations, isn't it? And you're right, Inquire are a really good organisation as well to connect with when it comes to this. So thank you very much to both of you, and it just goes to just give one final shout out. We had a lovely comment here from somebody who's watching who said, I've had support from this organisation and it was excellent. So I think that's a wonderful note to end on, and thank you very much to the person who's posted that comment. I know it means a lot to the team when they get feedback like that. They work very, very hard to try and support as many people as they possibly can. So I know it means a great deal to them. So thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Samantha, for your expertise as usual, answering those questions. Again, if there's anybody watching that thinks, I've got a question, then please do either drop us an email or pick up the phone, and you can connect with our community team. So that is the end of our Advice Line live event today. It just leaves me again to say thank you to everybody that is joining us. If you would like to hear more information or get more insight into any events that we're running in the future, then please do check out our website. And I would just like to give a special mention to our conference that's coming up in October. Set to be a really fantastic conference focusing on relationships and why relationships matter. And I think that's been quite a common theme throughout the questions that we've answered today. They come down to relationships. It comes down to being in a space with somebody, listening to what matters to them, and responding to what matters to them. So we're really excited to host this conference and really start some great discussions and conversations around relationships and what that looks like and what it should look like. And we're really keen to hear from a variety of voices around that. So please do, if you can, join us for our conference. We've got some really great speakers attending. We've got Sarah Ryan, who will be joining us, and she will be sharing some research that's been recently done into relationships. We also have Holly Sutherland. If you've ever caught Holly before speaking, absolutely fantastic. I've had the privilege to listen to Holly speak a number of times and come away really enthused and really excited and really sort of keen to embed some of that I've heard. So join Holly, and she's going to be sharing autistic perspectives in social communication. And I think, to your point, Caroline, about what does the person want and how do we tune into those autistic voices. And we're really, really delighted to welcome the award-winning comedian, Joe Wells. He will be closing our conference this year with a really sort of slightly tongue-in-cheek topic of how to support non-autistic people, which I think will be absolutely one not to miss. So if you can, do join us. Full information around our conference will be posted below the event, but you can check out www.scottishautismconference.org for further information and all the ways to book. So really one not to be missed. So if you can, do join us then. So again, thank you very much to my colleagues for joining me, and thank you to you guys for joining us again and for your questions. So we'll see you again next time. Thanks, everybody.